Hi, this is Rabbi Rami Goldberg, and welcome to Biblical Money, powered by Israel 365, where we take a deep dive into how people of faith enhance their business by staying true to their biblical principles. We interview leading CEOs, executives, and entrepreneurs to capture their wisdom to help us live our most fulfilled and faithful lives. Please like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date and informed. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Biblical Money. I am Rabbi Rami Goldberg. I'm here with Keith Toogood, who is from Lubbock, Texas, involved in real estate, a number of other kingdom businesses, and I'm really excited to talk to him. He's an author, a father of 3 wonderful children, and really excited to have you on today. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive into all this.
Yeah, so I mean, we really hit it off. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and in terms of, I think we're both passionate about business and about the Bible and the intersection. You've taken it a step way further than I have as far as being an author and getting out there. So give me a little bit of background. How'd you get into this? How did your kind of Christian development, enter this? And, at what point was this, did God put it in your heart that, okay, business and Bible are not mutually exclusive, which so many people feel that they are?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that is that's my entire testimony that you just asked about. And so I grew up, I always jokingly say I'm kind of the mud of Christianity. My dad was Catholic. My mom was Methodist. I was sprinkle baptized as a baby in both. And then they sent me to a Church of Christ school, another denomination. And so I grew up what I would consider, very legalistic in a lot of ways, in good ways. But at the same time, I just didn't fully understand really what my calling was. And I was really good at sports. I played football at Texas Tech. I was a field goal kicker there, multi-sport athlete, but I found my way through that. And it was really interesting going to a Christian school. I had a lot of friends that were, they were being called into ministry, and, they were going to go to this seminary or that seminary or this school or that school. And I just never heard that, and I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to go pursue and try and make the NFL as a kicker one day. And that was my big dream. And then, I would go to church on Sunday, listen to those guys or, guys like them that were called to that and try and live the best life that I possibly could. And so I was always this really, really good kid. Never got in trouble, never went to the principal, saved myself for marriage, never been drunk, never smoked anything, and really just tried to live the lifestyle of what I felt like Christianity was called to, and still maintain that to this day. I've still never been drunk, and faithful to my wife and try and raise my kids in a way that's pleasing and honoring to the Lord. But there was still an emptiness for me. I didn't fully understand it. And so as I went, my journey, I was the starting kicker for Tech as a freshman. And then by the time I was a senior, I'd been benched my junior year, long story short, been benched my junior year and was honestly ready to quit. And I already had my degree in marketing. And I was like, well, and I had the love of my life by my side. And I was like, man, we can just get married and, all the things. And she goes, don't quit. God's got something for you. And she was like, you can be a light in that locker room. And besides that, you can travel all over the country and see these great stadiums and be a part of all that. She's like, why not? And I was like, yeah, that's true, but that summer going into my senior year, God got a hold of me and I started reading like crazy, reading all kinds of books. And he just took me in a deeper way in my faith. And got the starting kickoff job back. And then by the time it was all said and done, I had some workouts with the Bills and the Cowboys and things were going good. And then he shut that door as fast as he opened it. And I was like, man, what are you doing? And so you go through these ups and these downs.
Maybe if the Bills had taken you as the kicker, they wouldn't have, my childhood would have been totally different, wide right over there.
Oh, yeah. That was a little before my time. That was was that the early 90s, I think?
Yeah, I think it was 91, but I mean, as a Giants fan growing up in New Jersey, it was like edge of our seats. And, I'm saying we were praying, on our knees and, beseeching. I'm sure the Bills fans were as well, but
yeah,
I don't really
absolutely.
care what their prayers were, But,
sure.
So.
It was an interesting journey. And then all of a sudden it comes to an end, and you're just like, well, now what? My identity was so much in sports and, my dream of playing in the NFL, and I didn't know what to do. But I got married. My wife and I, the same girl that I mentioned earlier, Brandy, we had gotten married, and I needed to provide for my family and be that guy. And so I started working for her father-in-law in the restaurant business and just going through all that. And I tried to live out my faith, and I tried to figure out, how can I share the Lord with these people and how can I live this out and combine and not separate business from my faith, but how can I make those together and marry those? And so as the years went, I did that and then, just felt called to something different. And so we started a home building business. Wild story. You can read about it kind of in the book that I wrote. And that's kind of a whole deal too that we'll probably dive into. But it was about 5 years ago that I'd always, said to some degree, we're in the ministry. We just happen to build homes for a living. I also started an Orange Theory fitness gym. And, in that I said, hey, we're in the ministry. We just happen to provide a place where people can work out. And so I was really beginning to learn how to share my faith to my employees, and I was learning how to be more bold because a lot of people that know me now don't know this, but I was the most shy kid you'd ever meet in your entire life. Didn't want to talk to anybody, hid behind my mom's leg, just very,
that's
very,
like the
very
kicker,
shy.
and end of the bench. You're not as
Yeah, yeah,
usually smaller, right? Not
yeah.
big, big like a linebacker or whatever, but
Yep. And so, in my high school days, I played quarterback and free safety. So, like on the field, like that was my place. Like I loved it. My leadership was strong on the field, but out in like the general public or just like, I like smaller friend circles. I'm more introverted deep down. And so sharing my faith was not an easy thing. I was like, how do I go about this? Like, you just go up to somebody and be like, hey, you need to know Jesus, or you need to know my Lord, or and it's like walls go up. And so anyway, we really started saying, hey, we're in the ministry, and this is some terminology I felt like the Lord began to give me. We're in the ministry. We just happen to build homes, and there is no separation here. There is no way of saying, well, you can't talk about your faith in business. Well, yeah, you can. There's no laws against that. I can't hire based on those kind of things. Like I can't discriminate in that kind of way, but I can sure as much as I want to talk about my faith. And I can tell people, look, you may not believe what I do, but I want you to know who I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I was sharing my entire testimony with a guy. We were headed to Glorieta, New Mexico for kids camp. I was going to go be a leader for the third grade boys. And it was about a 4.5 hour bus trip. And I started telling him my story, and he heard the whole thing, and he goes, man, that's amazing. That is unbelievable, just how the Lord's been working in your life, and I love that. And he turned around, and I'll never forget this, and I had this thought, or I felt like the Lord said to me, how do we get other people to share their faith like that? And I was like, huh. And so at that point, that's where Boom really was born, and we felt this call to business people, and how do we equip business people to be able to carry their faith? Because I look at it, and when Jesus called those 12 disciples that he originally called, man, they were just a bunch of business guys, and some fishermen and a tax collector and all these different things. And I thought, man, that lie that I believed years ago that I wasn't called was just that. And if I really believed that God created me in his image and he wired me for business, and the very first dudes that Jesus handpicked were some business guys, and man, there is a calling on my life. And I thought so many times, I'm like, if you can get a business person, and I'll say business guy, business person that, man, they are so good at selling their product. They understand their product. They know how to communicate with people. They know how to show benefits, and they know how to show all those things about their business. Well, can't they do the same thing with their faith? And if they can carry that with them, man, they go all over the world. And if we can carry that with us everywhere that we go, then I think all bets are off.
I mean, the Bible is the greatest selling book of all time.
Amen.
And I think there's a difference in, kind of there might be different gradations, obviously, depending on how you speak to different people, which is always in sales, where depending on who you're speaking to. But
yeah.
Obviously, step one is belief in God. Before we get into the nitty gritties of more belief or doing this or practicing, just like, let's bring God back into the conversation. And I think, that's part of my impetus for this podcast is to say, how come God is absent from the boardroom? I think we had an election a couple of weeks ago, which I do think that people voted to say, you know what, we've been silent for long enough, taking God out. And now let's reintroduce, let's bring this back into our schools, back into our homes, back into our hearts. And that's, but that's amazing. So tell us about BOOM. Stands for business, something.
Yes.
So,
you nailed it.
I nailed it. I nailed it.
You
Yes.
nailed it. It stands for business operating on mission. And so what I love about it is that I feel like God gave me the greatest play on words ever, because when a business is doing well, it's booming. And so we say a lot, hey, are you running a booming business? And they're like, yeah, it's great. We're doing really well. And I'm like, well, let me ask you a different way. Are you operating your business to advance the kingdom of God? And they're like, what do you mean? And so it begins to allow us to have conversations. Because I was this very shy person. Well, now somebody can ask me. They're like, "What's boom?" or "What is that? Where'd you get that from?" And well, I'm in the ministry. I just happen to do this. We're actively trying to advance God's kingdom through the interactions and the things that we do with our subcontractors, our customers, and not be forceful, but just meet them where they are and be like, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know, I've been praying for you, and if there's anything I can pray for, please let me know." And all of a sudden, man, it's doors just fly open to conversations. It's been really cool, and he also showed me the attack on young men and boys. I've seen that for a long time. So we have bros operating on mission. And so that's pretty fun. We call it a new generation of boomers. And so that's been pretty fun. And then more recently, he's shown me the body operating on mission. And it's everybody coming together and saying, "Hey, Father, how do we bring your kingdom onto this earth? How do we usher in your presence into everything that we do? And how do we glorify your name through it all?"
I like that. I don't know if you connected this to your previous work as far as having a gym and saying body operating on mission, but that's that's also part of it is and there are actually many sages that actually bring this up, that one of the first steps to repentance is repentance of the body, is taking care. God gave us this earthly body. The first thing I need to do is take care of that. Then I can, once that's healthy, and obviously we see the sickness that's happening and the obesity and all the different things that are happening, that if we don't take care of that body, then what does the soul look like inside? Obviously there are people, who have beautiful souls and they have, challenge with the body, but, having those work together is really just, something amazing. So I don't know if that's what you had in mind as far as body operating, but
we didn't at first. And then what I did tell and really where it all began is as I sat down with these people, and it was actually in a town that I had never been to outside of visiting it to find out if this is what we wanted to do with this Orange Theory Fitness. But these people had no idea who I was. I'm opening this business, but I sit down with them. The very first thing I said is, "Hey," I said, "You know what? First and foremost, you need to know that like my faith is a massive part of my life. And so for me, this place is a ministry. And so I want you to feel free if you feel led to play Christian music, or you feel led to pray for someone, or if you feel led, please know that there are I have nothing against that. And know that you're free to do that. Before we even talk about how we're going to operate this business, I want you to know that this is a big part of who I am, And man, it was amazing to just share those things, and then to have people come up to me afterwards and be like, "I have never had a business owner or a manager tell me anything like that. Thank you so much for telling me that, because it helps me know where you stand, and it helps me even with my own faith to know that that's okay." And that was so eye-opening to me, to have that. And so we've actually I've become a good friend with not yet good friends, but recently introduced to a guy that he owned a gym here in Lubbock called Bodyworks, and he's a big follower, faith-filled guy. And I said, and he started that years and years ago. He since sold it, but I said, was that in regards to the body, like the body of Christ and God's body operating together? And he goes, "I wish I could take credit for that, but no, not initially. But I've since seen the significance of that."
Yeah, no, it's and I think again, we don't share the same faith, but we share many of those same principles in terms of bringing it out. In terms of, I know I sometimes will be in the middle of a meeting and I have to say the afternoon prayers, and it's like I'm going to stop this meeting wherever we are, and I gotta go run. I gotta either catch a quorum or whatever I need to, and that just should be something that we're much more comfortable. And I think again, the more that God is brought back into, into these conversations, it's better for everyone, in terms of, so you've hired people. Do you find, so, as far as do you find that your biblical principles affect how you're running the business, not just bringing faith and not just praying with people, which are kind of religious aspects, but, in terms of how you mentor people or how you hire people?
Oh, absolutely. We have, several different like principles that we operate out of. One of them that usually gets people's attention, that they kind of laugh about. We'll say things like, "Hey, don't have a king's mentality," in regards to, man, everybody's here to serve me as the owner of the business. No, I'm actually here to serve you guys, and how can I make your job easier, and how can I do things for you? But the one that usually gets a lot of people's attention is, pay your bills. And that's one of the principles we operate out of is if someone does work for us, and now you got to obviously, you know, you got to agree to the terms of the bill, right? But at the end of the day, we don't stiff people. If they've done work, we're going to pay them, and we're going to show them their value, and all these different things. And so there are so many principles that we operate out of. Everything that I do is based on my faith, everything. And so there is no separation for me, because I can't be someone who I'm not. And if I'm being someone that I'm not, then that just makes me a fraud. And I really don't want to be that. Does that mean I'm perfect at it? By no means, right? There are times where, we've had to stand our ground on certain things, and we don't always agree. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to pray for that person. I'm going to still love them and forgive them, and kind of back to what you were saying. I think a big part of our body, earlier, a big part of our body is, I think sometimes we have so much anger and resentment towards people, and such a lack of forgiveness for another human being who's imperfect, just like I am, that it can actually create. One of my good friends, Holly Beatonbow, she goes, it creates disease, and then she said it's dis-ease, and I was like, ooh, and that disease in our body just begins to eat us up. And because of all that, we hang on to anxiety, and we hang on to anger, and we hang on to fear, and all these things that are not of God, right? They're just not. And so how do we, from every aspect of our lives, how do we live this out? And even through the challenges um, and the disagreements, or whatever may exist, how do we live it out, and how do we love our brother?
Yeah, and it's difficult sometimes with employees. Vendors are one thing, vendors, as you said, we had a term. I expected you to, finish the whole contract, and then it's 95% done. So he's like, no, it's 95% done. Pay me 95%. So it's like, well, no, we agreed when it's finished, and that can sometimes be difficult, because you're like, I really want to pay you,
Right.
and I forget where. I think it's in Leviticus, right? In terms of paying your workers on time before the
Yep.
nightfall, or that's
Whatever you've
also,
got it.
when we passed. So my company is now a little over 11 years old, and just when it was 10 years old, and we hit 120 consistent payrolls. I mean, I get like a real excitement. I'm like, well,
That's
it
awesome.
stinks. I hate paying taxes, and it's a lot of money and a lot of people,
Yeah.
but I'm like, wow, this is just something where, thank God, I am this messenger to be able
Yeah.
to distribute money to other people. Obviously, they're working for it. It's not a handout by any stretch of the imagination. People
Right.
work hard for what they get, but yeah, it's so critical.
Yeah.
Have you had
100%. Go ahead.
challenges where you've let somebody go, and it's has not gone well, and you weren't able to see eye to eye, and how did you kind of overcome that?
Yeah, that's actually been really interesting as we've gone, because you do have people, they come and they go. Some quit, and they realize it's not a good fit for them, and others you do have to let go, and handling that as gracefully as you can. And I've actually asked them, and I think it's so wise for us to surround ourselves with other, like-minded people, right? To talk about these kind of things. And so I asked two guys very early on, and I'll never forget these responses. I said, as a kingdom-minded Christian businessman, or woman, but these were two guys. But how do you handle firing? Because we're called to so much grace, and we're called to so many different things. And one guy was like, "Oh, that's pretty easy for me." And I was like, "Okay, well, let me hear it." And he goes,
Yeah, I'm waiting.
I'm like, "Man, yeah, right." And I was like, he goes, I realize that that person is not operating in their gifting. And so why should I hang on to that person if I know they're not in their gifting? Why do I hang on to them just out of selfish reasons because they're filling a role when I know that they would thrive better in some other position at some other company and be able to live out their gifting? And I was like, oh, that's phenomenal, dude. I love that. And he goes, and then I usually, most of the time I'm helping them, connect with another business. And so I'll call a buddy of mine that I think that they would fit well with and be like, hey, you know what? It didn't work here, but I think he's got these gifts and I think he'd be a really good fit for your organization. I was like, dude, I love that. I think that's phenomenal, where you're not so selfishly seeking things. And then the other guy, he said, for
Definitely,
me,
definitely easier. Sounds easier than it actually sometimes
yes,
rolls out when you
it,
actually go to have those conversations to say you're not gifted in this particular location, and they're like, so. But
yeah,
I mean, that's been my
100%.
experience. It could be for this guy, he's, but
Maybe yeah, he's gifted at maybe being able to share that in a
yeah,
way that
God bless him.
yeah, amen. And then the other guy, he said, for me, he goes, when I have trouble with one particular employee, he said, that's one out of, call it 100 employees. And he goes, my obligation is, and this guy is really beginning to harm our business, right? And he's doing things that are not ethical, or he's doing things that are harmful to the business. Well, I got to remember there's 99 other people outside of him, that I have to protect as the founder and the owner of this business. And so my obligation is to the entirety of the people and not just that one. Do I try and help that one? Absolutely. But there comes a time where you just have to say, hey, look, this isn't working out, and I've got to set you free to go somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I often think about that. Someone's screwing a hole in the bottom of the boat. It's gonna affect us all, and so you have to sometimes move on. And I think that's just always a challenge because you see things from different perspectives. And I mean, look at Moses' role, right? He was sitting and judging the people. What was he judging? They were having business disputes, and they were all lined up until Jethro came along and said, "Okay, we need to go ahead and." We need to come up with some sort of court system because you just can't do this. You're an old man already, so um,
Yeah, this is going to wear you out, and that's been my experience too. Is like, and that's one of the things I've learned more over the years. Is my businesses have grown and developed and changed. As the owner in particular, you can't be everything to everybody. And I think so often, because a lot of times the owner is probably multifaceted, multi-gifted. They can do certain things throughout the business. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have started it. But to allow people to operate out of their position and out of their place, because if you try and handle every situation, and you try and control everything, at the end of the day, you're just literally putting a stranglehold around your business. And it's not going to be as successful as it would be if you allowed those people to work out of their giftings.
yeah, no, and that's what Jethro was seeing. He was like, okay, you can't, the nation cannot grow. It cannot operate under a system where with just a single person that everything comes to, even though you're the one who spoke to God directly and you're the one who, has the Bible and has all the knowledge. And so you'll figure out. So everyone will get a little bit less, but overall it's
Yeah.
certainly good
Well,
for
and
the,
what I loved about that conversation between Jethro and Moses is he was like, hey, to those, delegate that to those people and that many, and they oversee this many. But he was like, but the cases that they can't handle, you need to take on. And you don't just get to escape your responsibility as an owner, right? Like, and there's times, or as the leader, there are times where, the people I have in position, they don't hear directly from the Lord, let's say, or they don't know how to handle that situation. And so at that point, they do need to bring it to me, and I need to get involved. But I have to, and Moses did too. He had to continue seeking the Lord so that he could know where they were going and how to get there. And if he's so tied down by all the day to day and the problems and the issues they're facing, then they can't move forward. They're just going to get stuck. And so, yeah, I've pointed to Moses and Jethro as a major piece of great just business stewardship.
Yeah, yeah, and Moses as being the most humble man, that's also well, that's what leadership is all about. I've quoted this, I quote it all the time, but there's hundreds of times where it says, and God says to Moses saying, and there's only once that it actually says it the opposite. It says, and Moses said to God saying, right, with the audaciousness of when was that? That comes to the appointment of Joshua as the next leader, because Moses said, it's not about me. It was never about me. From
Yeah.
day one, I didn't want this position. You forced it on me. From and I will do and I will serve, but ultimately it's about the people. As soon as it
Yeah.
becomes about me, it's not up to me. But passing on that level, that level of leadership, and I think Jim Collins writes about that. That's the highest level of leadership, like good to great, where kind of passes on that that leadership. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so tell me about your book. Listen, you have such a great last name. I mean, I don't know how you got that. It's Toogood, right? So your name of your book, remind me, is Too Good to Be True. Too good.
Yeah, too good. Yeah,
Uh,
too good to be true. A call to kingdom business.
yeah,
Yeah, that was so cool because I really initially wasn't going to call it that. I didn't know what I was going to call it, and man, I prayed and I felt called to write when I turned 30 years old. And you know, started with some things, and at the time, I was writing some deep, what I would consider deep theological things. And hadn't been to seminary. I didn't have a psychology degree. I didn't, I wasn't an owner of a business. I was a manager of a local taco shop. And so like, I just didn't have the credentials. But God was calling me to something deeper. But at the same time, I've been in His Word since I was a little boy. And just studying and asking Him to lead me through Scripture and teach me and show me things. And so as we went, at 30, as the Lord gave me boom, I really wanted to document so much of this. And I felt like, okay, this is maybe what I'm supposed to write about. And so I wrote and I started doing some chapters and all that. And I had one of my best friends named Jay Long. He's a Christian music artist here in the States, and God connected me with him about 4 years ago, and he had a good friend that was a literary agent, and he was like, "I'm going to connect you with this guy," and so I sent him the stuff and some sample chapters, and he writes back after a couple of weeks of reading, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to encourage you to keep writing," and I'm not gonna lie, it scared the dog out of me. Because all of a sudden it became pretty real, like, oh man, this guy that he's pretty well known, he actually likes what I'm saying here. That scares me a little bit, and because I am shy by nature, I don't like to put myself out there. Now, as the years have gone, the Lord has made me more bold and more confident in my faith and in the things that He's shown me. But at the time, it scared the dog out of me, and I was like, ugh. And so I hid. I was kind of like I related to Moses and to Jonah, and some of those guys were like, "Nah, not me. Like I'm out.
pick
Like
somebody
find
else.
somebody
Pick
else."
somebody
Yep.
else.
Yeah.
I have a neighbor down the
And
street. He'll be perfect, right?
it'll be great. And so but then I prayed and I was like, Lord, if you really want me to do this, if this is what you've called me to do, then would you send somebody that prophetically would just speak into my life? And I've never really asked for any kind of prophetic word. But I was like, I don't want this to be about me. I don't want this to be something that I desire and you don't. So, kind of that same position, I guess, to a degree of like, man, if this is what you want for my life, then I want somebody outside of my own thoughts or my own thing, somebody to tell me. Well, anyway, my good friend Jay Long, he texted me in the middle of the night. I got it the next morning, but it was like 3:52 in the morning. I get a text, and he said, "Hey man, I'm up in the middle of the night. I went to the bathroom, and I'm not just up randomly texting you." And he goes, "I sat back down to lay my head back down in bed, and I heard the Lord say, 'Write,' with authority." He said, "Write," and He said your name. And he goes, and then he said a whole lot more, and it was all very like spoke directly to me. And He knows me well, but He didn't know me that well. And it was like one of those moments where I was like, whoa. And so he spoke into my life, and he goes, and this is the book of Too Good to Be True. And I was like, there it is. That's the name of the book. And so named it Too Good to Be True. I finished the book. I had like maybe 3 chapters left to write, and then started going down this journey. And so the premise of the book is, it's my testimony. And so I believe that there's so much power in how God has worked in our lives and our testimony, and how, just how God's worked in my life. And so that's the first part of the book, coupled with just a lot of things that the Lord has taught me over the years that I hope is, revealing or, encouraging to the person that's reading it. And then the second half of the book is really all about boom and the pillars of boom, and we've got 3 different pillars: how to share your faith, the spiritual warfare that I believe exists over business and why it exists, and then the calling to be a business person and carry out a kingdom business.
Wow. Okay. So that's definitely something to get. I see it's on Amazon. I could definitely pick it up. I don't think there are too many Too Goods out there, but
No,
you
sir.
know, definitely, definitely pick it up. Where's the name come from? Is it just
Yeah,
family's been around?
so my wife's grandfather originally thought it was Native. He had never met me or seen me. He thought it was Native American at first, and so I guess like Chief Too Good, you know. And then, but no, it's actually English, and so I don't know the full story behind it. I've read something, or my dad shared it with me. I can't remember, but I read somewhere that like if a knight had done something really good, then the king would give him the surname Too Good. And so I'm running with it. I think it's great.
Right. Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that's
That's
100%
great.
true or not, but I love it. I'm going with it.
Yeah, amazing. That's yeah, those things work. So, so I know you have three. You have 3 kids, 3 boys, correct? No, yeah,
2 boys and a girl.
2 boys and a girl. And so, how do you pass this on to your kids? What are some of the some of the kind of lessons as a father as you're coming through? How much do you share with them? Do you talk business with them? Do you talk Bible? Do you talk a combination?
Yes, all the above. They're actively, they're not obviously. So my kids are 14 years old. One will be 13 here in 3 days. Our little girl, she'll be 13 in 3 days, and then we got a 10-year-old little boy. And so, as they get older, that's definitely things that we're talking more and more about. But faith is such a big part of our family, and just equipping them for the future ahead, and what's coming. And I've got I guess a little thing that I've shared with our boys specifically, at our youth group and my oldest son, but we call it being battle ready, and really understanding, how the enemy operates. So I come from a sports background, and so sports is always a big, um, way that I connect things. And so we didn't go into a football game, or basketball game or whatever, not understanding our opponent's tendencies, right? Like we know how they operate. We know what ways he tries to trick us up, what ways they try and come against us. And so we got to be battle ready and understand, all right, here's our plan of attack. Here's how we're going to go about it. And so that's been a big part of one of the things I've shared a lot with our kids is like, hey, you got to start making decisions now about what life looks like and what decisions, and when the enemy attacks you with drinking or with sex or whatever the case may be, how are you going to stand strong against those things? Well, if you're just living life, well, it's pretty easy to follow those. But if you are in your word, and and we've talked about these things, and you've got convictions and you're battle ready, then you can go out. And so the same thing with our business, right? Like, we have to be prepared for what the enemy's going to do and what he's going to throw at us, and all those kind of things. So, um, one of my oldest boy, he's starting to get a little bit more entrepreneurial. He's trying to figure out how to make money. He's getting to the place where the allowance isn't enough, for some of the things that he wants. And my daughter, she's very she's always been very entrepreneurial. Like she was going around at like 10 years old. She was making bracelets and going door to door trying to sell them,
I
and
got I got one of
and
those
so
also. Yeah, that's
yeah. And then my youngest, he loves sports and music. I think he's actually kind of he's got a music inclination to him, and so it's been interesting. And God gives us all different kinds of they're all three different from the same parents. You know how that is, you know.
amazing. Yeah, I look at them like I'm saying we didn't do things that were so different that you should you should act or respond so differently to what we're saying. For the most part, the instructions have been you know somewhat similar. But yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see that the kids grow up and to see how they prioritize. I think one of the big challenges that we have in our generation is when we were younger, it was okay. Maybe you saw lifestyles of the rich and famous, but you didn't. It wasn't really in your face. It was like on once a week, and some no name channel when you weren't watching the regular shows that we were all watching. But now it's like such in our face. Where look, this kid, he bought Bitcoin and it was $1,000, and now he's a millionaire because
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and that can happen so rapidly that it causes people, I think, to a certain extent to be, to think that business is either easy or it's going to happen. Um, Gambling. I mean, you couldn't gamble on a sports game growing up. It was like unless you went to Vegas when we were growing up, and
Vegas, yep.
now, now every app, every sports game, you could bet on every play in every game. So I definitely think those create additional challenges.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting dynamics of all this is like, my kids, they're just exposed to so much that they are they just see so much, things that we never saw and access to things that we never really had a part of. And to see them be able to kind of the world thrown at them at such a young age. And it's like, okay, how do we really begin to teach you the principles of money? How do we begin to teach you that versus greed versus, and how do you steward what God's given you, and how do you utilize the resources and the things He's given? Because my kid, my oldest one, he's like, what about drop shipping, Dad? What about this? What about that? And I'm like, well, hold on. Let's find out, where we're really geared up and operate out of your gifting, not just where the money is.
Yeah, no, it's and that's I think that's the challenge where as obviously things become much more expensive and inflation, all these different things, and it's like you can't sell a dollar for a cup of lemonade. It's not going to get you as far as hey, do you know what
Right.
my friend did? He bought something on eBay and sold it on Amazon, and he's so I think that's
Yep,
definitely
100%. Yeah, it's an
the
interesting dynamic, and so we're starting at a younger age. I say that I started mowing lawns when I was 9 years old. And so just started with that one across the street, and then the neighbor picked me up, and then another neighbor picked me up, and all of a sudden I had a little lawn business. And my
right.
brother and I grew it to 40 lawns by the time we were all said and done.
That's good money, right? It was probably
Yeah,
$5 a
absolutely.
lawn at that point. So
Yeah, yeah, yes, sir. So
so. But anyway, so we'll just we'll start start wrapping up. Do you have a favorite a favorite teaching, favorite message that let's say you're talking to your younger self, or getting into business? What would be a message that you would give to our young men and women who are looking to get into business and are really thinking about some of the challenges that lie ahead, that you would say, okay, if I knew this information when I was that age, or this is what they should be focusing on or thinking about?
yeah, man, that's a great question. I would probably say the number one answer I would give is trust God, and really seek Him out in what it is that how He's wired you. Because I think so often it's easy for us to see, oh, there the money's over there, and we go chase that. And I would say for me, it's like don't chase the money, chase the calling. And I think that's the bigger picture, because when you chase the money, there's you can be a millionaire and be miserable, and because you hate your job, There's no freedom in it. There's no creativity if, whatever the case may be. But I would say that, like, that's what I've learned over the years is man, God's got a specific wiring and calling for each one of us. And that's what I love about, the body operating on mission point of it is it's like, I may be strong in certain areas, but, and I could do finances really well. Excuse me. But it doesn't fuel me. It actually wears me out, and I'm like, ugh, by the end of the day, And so, but the woman in my office that does the finances, oh, she thrives on it. I mean, it's a game to her, and she just has the time of her life doing it. And it's like, man, find what you're geared for, and how God wired you, not how you just want to go chase money. That's probably some of the advice I'd give myself, my younger self, because I did. I probably started really just chasing the money, it's so easy to do that because it's so tempting because you got to take care of your family or you want to go buy some things, and it's like, well, but is that what God has for you?
Yeah, no, it's definitely true, and always a balance because you do have to put food on the table, and on the one hand, there are many struggling musicians who have said, I'm just following my passion. So obviously, always that balance. But yes, trust in God all the way, and trust it at every moment to recognize that this too will pass. As King Solomon said, like that don't get caught up in the moment and have that
Yeah.
trust. So, but
Well, and I think to King Solomon's his Ecclesiastes, and at the end of it all, he's like, it's just a chasing after the wind. It's meaningless. It's all these things, and the true gift that God gives us is today. And so at the end of it, he says something to the effects of, in all the days of toil under the sun, I've learned to eat, drink, and be merry. Nothing else will satisfy. Nothing else will fulfill, but just to literally rest in the day that the Lord has given us, and take that day and just be grateful for it.
yep, enjoy the family, do those great things. Keith, I can't thank you enough. I'd like to end with a prayer, with a blessing that God should continue to bless your handiwork, bless you and your wonderful family, and that you should have it should continue to inspire many other people in terms of the work that you're doing, and that we should see you here on this side in Israel soon, right? Still have not had a
I would
trip,
love
but
that. I would
I'll throw
love
that
that.
in
I
there.
would love to.
So,
Yeah, you mentioned that just real quick. You mentioned that you weren't too far away from David and Goliath, and just all these epic stories that, like, in oh man, to see that, I'm like, one day we're gonna get there, and it's gonna be awesome.
amazing, wonderful. Thank you.